everyone. If those of you on that are dialed in cannot hear, please let that be known at some point real soon. Welcome to the 988th meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. We are meeting in Chapel Hill at the Carolina Inn, so we can have our retreat after the meeting. I would like to read the ethics statement. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and the appearances of conflict. At this point, I'd like to ask if any board member has any known conflicts or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board today. If you do, please let it be known now. Not hearing any conflicts? Well, if so, identify the conflict or the appearance of conflict, refrain from any participation in the particular matter. That concludes that item on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the September 2021 meeting minutes. Those provided to you, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I will say for the record, Mr. Nixon had identified a typographical error in the minutes, which he communicated to me, and I appreciate that, Bill. We got that fixed. It said, the word annual was in, I think. We didn't get that one fixed. Thank you, Bill. There was that point correction.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Well,
Motion.
I'm sorry, is there any other additions or corrections? Hearing none, motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion and second. Anything else? All in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate.
Yeah, we still got to do a roll call. Okay. So the motion is to approve the September.
Yeah, we can close the door.
Ashley? Andy?
Ahoy.
Wafa? Yes. Michelle? Yes. And Bill?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, next item on the agenda is the financial report. We have here to provide the monthly financial report and the fiscal year financial audit results.
Keep this brief. October, we're looking good. Operating revenues, the only spike we've seen, and I put this in the memo, technician registrations are about $30K over budget, which is just odd. We don't know if that's them bolstering in anticipation of a busy vaccination season or what. Operating expenses still seem to be a little bit under, still limited operating and large purchases that will be made sometime this year. But overall, the financial standing for October. Delve into the weeds if anybody has specific line items that they want to ask about.
So by over budget, JP, you mean technician registrations are higher than we would have expected?
Higher than expected right now. See that our annual forecast for technician registrations, we're still below that. Predicted 90K for the year, but at this point during the year, we are well beyond where we thought we would be with technician registrations.
I think this is a carryover, Mr. Nixon, from last year. This is something we saw beginning in the last fiscal year as we continued through the summer and into the fall.
That's correct.
Yep.
Very good.
There's no questions on October's financials. We can segue in, I think the audit report that needs to be.
Well, as you all know, at the July meeting, I very much appreciate that the full board delegated to the Budget and Finance Committee the authority to receive, review, and accept as they wished the fiscal year 2020-21 audited financial report. And the Budget and Finance Committee did meet in October, received that report, and we did approve it. On behalf of the board, you have a copy attached in your materials, and I think we also emailed there was not even a single journal entry that they
2 years in a row, no adjustment.
So, JP and Rhonda are clearly doing terrific work in managing the finances and keeping the appropriate records. So, certainly if anyone has any questions, any of the board members have any questions, but do appreciate the Budget and Finance Committee for your thoughtful and thorough review of that report.
We do have some extra hard copies. Anybody would like a hard copy of the audit report?
Thank you very much. So, do I have a motion to approve the financial audit?
We actually don't need it. You can take it if you want to, but the Budget and Finance Committee exercised that authority.
Okay.
On that. So,
Very good. That brings us to licensing report by Missy.
Yep, I'm just gonna do a verbal report to shorten things up, but renewals have started, they started 11/1, everything is going really, really well. I haven't really gotten much username and password problems yet, but that's usually because I call this the honeymoon period, this is where people who actually have remembered their login information, they log in. We've had a couple instances of, using a new password, process that we put in place, and that's worked great. I've been able to send their a computer-generated password, and they haven't needed to call us, so that's excellent. As for the numbers, 5,080 have renewed as of yesterday at about 4 p.m.
that's pharmacists.
No, that's total.
That's
total. Pharmacists are 2,013, a little less than usual at this particular time, but nothing to be concerned about. Tech, 1,700, pharmacies, 862, CMEs, 257. So everybody's moving right along, and we haven't really had any hiccups, so. Excited about that. Any other questions?
Missy, I'm curious at the magnitude of increase in technician registration. And do you have any observations?
About the why it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, are we seeing new technicians or renewals, or is it a combination?
Oh, it's new technicians, yeah, I mean, it's a steady increase. I mean, we have probably 20 to 30 each day that submit a registration application. And then because of ThoughtSpan and because things are so streamlined, we're actually able to keep up with it, because honestly, we wouldn't have been able to keep up with it if it was before, in the old time, with paper applications in the sun. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is, administration of vaccines is the only possibility that I can think of, but I mean, it's a big industry, and we get a lot of people, now they don't all stay for a long time. They're a little bit younger, they're a little bit, transient, so they'll stay for a couple of years and then go inactive, but their registrations are flowing along.
Isn't this partly probably from turnover in community pharmacy as off the charts? I would suspect a lot of new faces, right?
Yeah, it's probably, that's the question, right, but the total number keeps going up. So it can't be entirely attributed to turnover, because those folks would be letting their registration go. But yes, I mean, as Missy pointed out, we all know that there are sort of career techs, and then there are techs who do this as a short-term thing.
So we will say that we have seen an increase in, nationally certified techs.
Oh, good.
Which is great, because I would have said the vast majority were just registered, not certified previously. Now, the certifications certainly aren't on par with the registrations, but they're definitely increasing. So that's a good sign.
And based on the question yesterday about how many techs had registered as vaccinators or indicated they were vaccinating,
Oh, yeah, I sent that over. I think it was, I'd have to look on these, but I think 2,600 had indicated that they are vaccinating.
And that's a voluntary.
That's an,
Yeah.
So it's likely more than that. We'll be brushing that up as a mandatory report with the new state statute going into next year, but that's voluntary. 2,600 have reported that they are vaccinating under the PrEP Act authorizations. But we know it's more than that. How much more, it's hard to say, but it's a lot.
And the total pool of technicians is about
20,000.
oh, yeah, we have 22,395. That's how many were licensed
perception that pharmacy, being a pharmacy tech is more of a career than just a job.
Right.
Any other questions or comments?
I want to compliment Missy and her staff. It has been, I hope we don't jinx it here. It has been.
Let's not say tape up.
It's not that we, you know, we have hiccups inevitably when you're reviewing roughly 50,000 different credentials, there are going to be hiccups, but, Missy and her team have gotten exceptionally good at sort of forecasting what the friction points are going to be and JP,
Yeah, I wanted to say too,
likewise,
JP
JP,
was really
the
helpful.
volume of transactions we have coming in, especially in the first couple of weeks of renewal, we had to learn some lessons about making sure that our system, banking system was capable, and JP very proactively, made sure that all that was going. So,
Yeah, that's been really helpful because I think for a couple of years in a row, we had an issue with at a certain time period because of the number and the velocity of transactions, it started declining hard. But since, you know, I worked with JP and let him know about that, and he worked with bank to make sure that, you know, our velocity has increased. We haven't had anything though. We haven't had anything. I appreciate that.
so thank you all.
Can you make any observations about the pharmacists who are renewing or have renewed, whether they're also voting or not voting?
No, voting is not something I look at. I only look at the number of renewals. Now, we could definitely, I mean, I think it's,
Well, the process for that will be, and we'll come back and talk about the election in a few minutes too, but the process for that will be as Kristen plans to continue, the practice she's developed in the last couple elections, which is once a month, we will notify all pharmacists in North Carolina, here's how many total votes we voted. Obviously, we won't be telling candidates, hey, here's how many voted for you, here's how many voted for you, and all that. But we will advise pharmacists of the total number of pharmacists who have voted thus far and remind them, and Kristen's really good about this, is reminding them that if they did not vote when they renewed their license, they can still go back and vote at any time during the election period.
and so I have noticed some do it simultaneously and some come back later. But I don't have any good numbers on that.
Any other questions for Missy on licensing? Next item on the agenda is the 2021 annual report. Mr. Campbell.
Yes, so each of you have a copy. As you know, under Chapter 19B of the North Carolina General Statutes, that's the statute that broadly governs all administrative or all occupational licensing boards. North Carolina requires the submission of an annual report. It's mainly a report on numbers of licensees, disciplinary activity. There have been some new categories added in the past couple of years, particularly with the General Assembly, as you all know, passed some statutes about temporary licensure and expedited licensure process for military, trained military applicants and military spouses. And actually, Missy had already set up a method to pull that data and segregate that data before this body required it. So we've been reporting that. This is, I think, the second or third year we've been reporting that data. But as usual, the data collection reporting system went very smoothly thanks to Missy and to Ellen and Cindy and Josh and Crystal tracking those numbers through the year. I would not pretend to you that the annual report represents some great piece of literature, but we do try to summarize some of the key things we've done over the previous year. It has been filed, Leslie did her usual great job of filing that with all the various and sundry administrative agencies who are required to get a copy. The form holds in about 2 weeks. Some subset of those agencies will tell us they didn't receive a copy, even though we have 3 receipts showing that they did. And so we'll send those out there and filed, and y'all, I emailed y'all copies, or Leslie did right after we got it filed. It does include the, financial, audit as well. Sometimes some state agencies receive this complaint, that we send them a copy of the financial audit and also attached it to the annual report. My explanation always is, I'd rather give it to you twice than have you think you didn't get it at all. So, we send it around. It's all done. Thank y'all for your help.
Did anything jump out at you as,
We detailed, mostly what we described in that was sort of, like every occupational license board, sort of, here's what we've done if I could with the COVID year. I described all, we did have, y'all know, we had a relatively active rulemaking year last year too, so that's most of what reminded the, powers that be that each of you had also completed all your required trainings and filed all your required statements and that kind of thing. Yours. We have elections underway. Is Kristen calling in? Okay, I can give the update on that. As you all know, as we just mentioned a few moments ago, the elections for the northern and western districts, seats are underway. Kristen and Antoine, worked, well and, put together the, voting tile. I think I imagine probably most of y'all have reviewed your licenses, and hope you found the, interface very, easy. Voting, as you know, will be underway through March 1st, 2022, which is the conclusion of the renewal. As I mentioned, Kristen will be sending out, at least monthly reminders to all pharmacists that the election is going on and that they can vote, anytime in that period, and it does not have to be, voting does not have to occur at the same time that the pharmacist renews, his or her license. I think the only question that came in thus far about the election is, by statute, pharmacists that are eligible to vote have to be pharmacists who live in North Carolina, and have an active license as of November 1st of each year. We did get an inquiry from one pharmacist who lives in South Carolina but works in North Carolina, and she had inquired about why she didn't have a voting tile, and I called her and explained to her, and she said, "Oh, that's right." And I said, "It does seem a bit silly, but that's the statutory requirement." Whereupon I encouraged her to move from South Carolina back to North Carolina, which is what I feel that all right should do anyway. But I think the process is going very smooth and very easy. The candidates were all great about responding to Kristen and getting her the biography that she needed to put up and the photos. So, very easy, very smooth. There's no active campaigning, please. But
Kristen was great. I mean, she was very confident with everything, so I want to give her kudos for that, as she always is.
Oh, yeah. She does a wonderful job with that. And, it's like every year, obviously, we have really good candidates, and we have really high candidate interest, which is always very encouraging to me. So, anytime you interact with pharmacists in the state, remind them, this is going on. And vote. That's all I got.
Okay.
Y'all were all there. Except Michelle, unfortunately, had a family emergency and couldn't attend. We missed you, Michelle, but, for my money, and others can chime in, it was very nice to have a live District 3 meeting again. I thought that the content was good and substantive. Tracy Collier, as you all know, is the Executive Director of the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy and a Campbell University, pharmacy graduate. Pulled the laboring oar on putting that meeting together, and a more challenging District 3 process she could not have had. Due to COVID, we had to move online in 2020. In and she rescheduled everything for August of 2021, and then with Delta, we decided we'd push it out to October with hopes that more fruit as it turned out, we'd be able to, meet live, so she had to reschedule it 3 times. But held it together. Andy was a participant in one of the panels and did a great job, with good board perspective, on a suite of issues affecting current practice. I think we had a great time networking with others, but so success all around. I know that the slide decks are available. I think they probably are on the District 3 website now, but if they're not, if anybody would like a copy of any of those, you can certainly check with Cindy Pierham, who, as you all know, is the long-acting Secretary-Treasurer of NABP District 3, which means she, in fact, runs NABP District 3, and did her usual bang-up job on that. I have been an officer and a board member of the NABP District 3 501c3 corporation for about 12 years now, and I did step down from that, just in the interest of other people doing that, and there wasn't really a whole lot else for me to do with that, so I appreciated being able to be on that. We incorporated District 3 12 years ago, and in fact, Clint's partner, Bob Saunders, helped us do that, and got a different board of directors, but I'd say the most important member that Cindy Pierham continues. Thank you all for being there. It was really a lot of fun. Great meeting.
We had some, team building activities. Can you cue up the video, Antoine, of, Ms. Vick, that I gave you earlier?
He's got me.
Nice try. You just gotta remember that Antoine has to work with us every day. We did, so I'll tell the one, his ones are improved, that everything is a seamless web. We had a reception at District 3, and the entertainment was the Band of Oz. And the only remaining founding member of the Band of Oz, which has been in existence for 50 years, is Keith Houston, who plays bass, and Keith's wife is Paige Thomas Houston, who operates Thomas Drug Store in Dunn, North Carolina. And so we got to go visit with Keith and catch up with him. That was a pretty cool,
Kind of surreal.
yeah, pretty cool little thing. But so there was dancing, and those records are permanently sealed.
Team building.
Team building.
Sorry,
No video?
no video.
No video.
Well, I have the.
Bill.
They're laying down.
Come on, Antoine, I know you can do it. Lost it in the transport.
That was a strong competition for that.
How much were you paid? Antoine, do you have that big magnet that kind of just floats on?
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes you would come through that metal detector we installed over the COVID break. Stuff happens with these phone rides.
Cell phone.
What do we miss out on?
Nothing. It was cathartic.
It was.
Yeah.
HR director.
And in all fairness, it was led by Al Carter. He really got it started.
I just followed his lead.
Just followed his lead.
I know.
All right, so one more little aside on that. As we were sitting here, I will say that I was standing over to the side next to Reggie Biller, and I think, Alan, you were standing over there too, when Al went out to dance, and Reggie looked at me and said, if you had any doubt, there has been a change
In leadership. I know.
I was meant for your consideration.
I know, I said.
Orman Catazone would have not gotten out on that dance floor and
I said Carmen is feeling a disturbance in the force.
They were.
We were.
I did.
Yeah, it was fun. And this is not making fun of Al, this is to the contrary, this is completely to Al's credit. Sorry.
All right. Josh Kohler, please tell us about Multicon.
Multicom was, those days were, illicit drug use, opioid use and abuse. There was a business meeting, where the same officers were reelected, John Kirtley, Ellen and Cindy were all reelected. There were other topics, were pop-up pharmacies, there was, something on USB 800 and 25, COVID-19, what we learned, and then there was, a good topic from a particular doctor, Dr. Mark Westfall, called Let's Think on It, and it was regarding, addiction, brain, and how it can be predisposed, to addiction and how it can hold. There was a good topic on, CBD and medical marijuana use by regulated, individuals. There was a working conditions topic, and then there were breakout sessions that unfortunately we didn't get to, I think we had to get on working to come back this week. Anybody want to ask anything about, the topic later on? I'm more than happy to, talk, yes.
The first topic, did you say
Pop-up pharmacies. It's basically where, bigger corporations or entities would come into various states, buy up a lot of the independent pharmacies for way above their worth, start with their, working in the gray area, and then close up and leave just as quick when they had the first whiff that they were being, investigated by any agency at all, whether it be a board pharmacy or DEA or whatever.
And the purpose to be, obviously to make money, but how would they do it?
Yeah, what's the money trail?
It was just, it was just that, it was just to make money. There was, they talked about, the, Medicaid fraud, claims that happened, with, DME stuff and with, prescription medication. We kind of saw a little bit of that here, maybe not a whole lot of fraud, but, there's been a lot of independents bought up in North Carolina by, various, select groups.
Pain cream and diabetic supplies.
Yep. It's what they move in and do, and then when people start sniffing around, or it changes the business model. We went from pain cream, diabetic supplies, and we're looking to see what's next.
Someone was just indicted in
Dermatology
California
cream, yep.
who bought a pharmacy in North Carolina and generated some number of millions of dollars in like 3 weeks in Italy. Oh, wow.
And that happened several years ago. We
But they just now got it.
Yeah.
It would have been longer than 3 weeks, had we not done it.
Yeah.
Whose turn is it to host next year? Which state?
For Multigon,
Yes.
it's Louisiana, so we'll be in New Orleans.
New Orleans, okay.
Yep.
Well, there you go. It was still there.
I think Michelle will be at Multigon next year.
Yeah. Motion that I'm elected board member of America.
You can come back.
You can come back.
So are the slides available, Josh?
I believe, on the Multigon website, I do believe that there's
We'll take a break.
slides
Yeah.
with the.
As a non-registered, I would love to see those slides.
We'll get it to you.
Any questions? Further questions for Josh? Now let's move on to rulemaking.
So, Mr. President, 3 different rulemaking pieces for us today, and these are all coming out as a product of our new planned committee working system. And I want to say personally for me that I thought it had to be virtual again. Hopefully that's the last time. But from my standpoint, and I think I can speak for the other staff too, having the committee work last October was terrific. We got a lot of things accomplished, and I am most appreciative that it gives an opportunity for other members of the staff to sort of be your main liaisons on some of these topics. So seeing here come out, are the results of some of those. And the first, potential rulemaking we have is potential, request, I'm sorry, I'm gonna start trying to speak English here. A proposed publication of amendments to Rules 1606 and 1607. These would be the amendments that would implement the committee recommendations, which you had already accepted in principle, that we would be moving away from requiring pharmacist managers to make a in-person visit to the Board of Pharmacy to obtain a new pharmacy permit, and would instead shift to an online, required online education program. And Missy has put together a memo for that. Missy, I'll shut up and let you do what you know more about than I do.
I think you said it pretty much. You know, basically, we did our video. I mean, we're working on the video and then plan to get something with the rulemaking process. And we had a draft of the video. We viewed it and got some feedback and are doing those edits as we speak. So that is still in flux. But where we're at is the proposal of the rulemaking. And I mean, this is all.
By way of.
I will turn it over to Clint now.
I sense her looking at me. Okay, we have, a couple of proposed, rule amendments. This is one that is like the LSP rule. When I dug in to make the required changes, one of the rules was so poorly designed and out of date, I needed to just revise the whole thing. So, 1616 is the old rule that required a personal appearance at a permit meeting. It now says that you have to do an educational module, so that's the one, the gateway, and the pharmacist manager or person in charge has to personally do it. We also needed to amend 1607, which is the out-of-state permit rule, because that rule referenced the in-person meeting. So, the two purposes really in getting under the hood of that rule were to change that in-person meeting requirement, and to say that the pharmacist manager on the home state permit has to be the pharmacist manager here. That has not heretofore been the rule, and in large part, many out-of-state pharmacies do not have their pharmacist manager as the pharmacist manager here because they don't want to have to send their actual pharmacist manager to an in-person permit. Without that requirement being there, there was really no reason to have, to allow them to pick some other person who they claimed is in charge, but who actually has no supervisory authority over the pharmacy. So we needed it to match. There was no reason for it not to match. And as I say, in general, 1607 was poorly and archaically written. It hadn't been revised in a long time. There was a long, involved description, for example, about what corporate officers and owners had to be disclosed on a permit application that used terms that I don't even know what they were supposed to do. So we have revised that. There's a long attempt to restate the registered agent requirement, which was a poor version of the statute. It's better just to say, look at the registered agent statute and name it. So it was changes of those sorts, and those things that are not understandable or not really consistent with pharmacy practice. It said you could prove that you're a registered pharmacy by getting a letter from your home state board of pharmacy. So, those are the proposals. If you have any questions, I can answer them, but I think the staff, and the committee has approved the staff drafting, so I think it's up to y'all to decide whether it's public, for those to comment or not.
That's a couple questions.
statute with respect to out-of-state permits does not require and at least arguably prohibits us from requiring that statutory.
I don't know that it would matter, but I'm just curious.
Bill is right that the trend to the extent you can discern one in other states in recent years has been to specifically require the pharmacy to charge our government an out-of-state pharmacy to have a personal license in the state, but Clint's right, our statute on that particular point doesn't require it. And so my feeling is that we couldn't accomplish that by statute.
And, under the memo, proposed changes where you summarize, 1 and 2 talk about dispensing prior to licensure,
Mm-hmm.
and then number 2 says, you have to disclose. I know you guys, or I think you have been requiring that anyway.
Yes.
So what's the consequence? Somebody is, applying for a non-resident permit in North Carolina, and they disclose some level of dispensing prior to getting the permit. What, is it an automatic denial that they can come back in a year? Or?
Usually staff, almost always staff will say, I can't grant this.
Which is not the same as a denial.
Right, you have to go to the board members to see what they think about that. And then in 99.9% of the cases, people say, no, we'd rather not.
And Bill, historically, it depends. It's like anything else. It depends on the particular facts. Well, we've had cases where pharmacies have shipped large amounts for long periods of time, or even worse, or specifically notified, you have to have a permit to be providing pharmacy services in North Carolina and continue to do it then with no argument. But again, those are the folks that tend to say, we can't approve it, you can go and ask the board, and usually they'll say, never mind. When we've had cases where it's been for a very brief time, a very small number, and some credible statement of this was a good, like sometimes we get we've had cases where somebody enters a zip code the wrong way in a database someplace, and so then it doesn't look like it's coming to North Carolina, and it winds up coming to North Carolina. Some of those very sporadic things, we don't jump up and down and make a big deal about that.
Can you differentiate on that request, or is the pharmacist required to differentiate what's, a database entry versus an actual shipment to, I mean, I could be traveling through Minnesota on vacation and need my Flomax or whatever.
The application says, list everything that you dispense, and it doesn't say, give us an explanation.
But then,
why they always do.
then we get an explanation on that.
Really, the difference is, how much we jump up and down and say we're going to oppose this. And typically, when people find out we're going to oppose staff, but they didn't ask for it.
It's easy to query databases for zip codes.
Yes.
Much more difficult to query your shipping records for, in my experience anyway, for what actually, but I guess it becomes obvious. It's a large number.
Yeah, if somebody says to us, we shipped 3,000 prescriptions into North Carolina over 3 years without a permit, they probably are not going to have any sort of explanation for that.
It's just a good point to ask about the change of ownership, like when Mega Pharmacy in Colorado buys a smaller pharmacy in Arizona, and the Colorado guy's been banned from shipping forever and ever.
That's a different set of issues than it would be under this particular, that would be the 16.
It does have, there is one point where we emphasize, once there is a change of ownership, you have to, the whole permit is there. And there was a sentence about that was already in there, but
And again, a reminder, what's on the table is not adoption of these rules. What's on the table for this is an agreement to publish versus license.
Anybody like to make a motion one way or the other, whether to publish?
I'll make that motion.
Which? To publish?
Yes.
So we have a motion to publish the rule, proposed amendment, sorry. Is there a second? Michelle seconds.
You have
Any
to call
other
the roll.
discussion? Okay, indicate your approval or lack of approval to publish.
Michelle?
Andy?
Yes.
Keith? Steve?
Ashley?
Yes.
Wallace?
Yeah, and Bill. Sure.
Thank you all. Thank you to, I'm sure the committee will have some additional work to do once the comments come in on this, but committee members, thank you for very productive.
Obviously, Clint, those rules, right?
Well, the committee also made some excellent suggestions on video.
The video is coming. And two of the board members already seen it, they do enjoy it.
It was really, really good. I mean, you guys did excellent work.
This is becoming quite an adept and accomplished video producer in here.
The how-to
did get-
videos are coming soon.
You did get executive producer credit on it.
She's got a SAG card now.
And it starts our very end.
Yeah, all the content is Crystal and Josh. None of that is, well, not none of it, but the vast majority is not me. So Crystal and Josh have done an excellent job with, providing the content for the video. And then Third Wheel did a great job with the production of it. But we got some feedback that we'll just go back. I think that we're gonna organize things a little differently, make it a little bit longer, a little bit, not quite as fast, because it's a lot of content and a lot of important content, and we really want to make sure that,
How long is it at this point?
at this point, it's 15 minutes, but we're gonna increase that, and we're gonna add some time for people to call and things like that, so.
Did we discuss doing like knowledge checks in the middle? I can't remember, it just hit me.
Yeah, we talked about like a pause play functionality, but we'll probably have to, instruct the viewer to be like, okay, if you'd like to, think about this material a little bit more, you can press pause.
Or, I mean, what I was
And a summary.
thinking, maybe like, I mean, I know we can't require a test like we talked
Right.
about, but,
Right.
like just having like just a quiz question just for reinforcement.
It's a
Just to test
possibility.
them.
Not, it's not.
Not a graded test.
Not a grade. It's open book, open note. That's right, phone a friend.
Keep the faculty appointment, you're starting to,
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I know, yeah. It's exciting. I mean, it's a huge move. I mean, if these rules and the amendments to the rules can pass, it's gonna change, how we permit, which is awesome.
And we thought about letting everybody see it this next time, but I think it was a little fast, so I think Lindsay was gonna work on trying to get it slowed down a little bit and make it exciting so you guys could see the final of it.
Yeah, y'all will get a special screening. We're all gonna be at the Red Chinese Theater.
The
red carpet.
I know, is, hard to say.
Gwen's gonna put on an evening gown.
I know.
We did have to slow it down because we are in the South. And we talk into
Keith did, I talked slow, and I gave the knowledge even slower.
Yeah, I'd like to see it before there's an actual
Oh, yeah.
lock on it.
Oh, of course, yeah, definitely. But we're gonna, I think there'll be a couple of drafts, before it gets to the full board, but you'll definitely get some suggestions.
But y'all will remember Third Wheel is the media company that we established a relationship, 4 or 5 years ago, to do some, additional work for us, so that relationship continue to pay dividends.
Thank you.
So the next item in the rulemaking, docket today is, as you all know, at the July meeting, received a memo discussing, and recommending from were to engage in a rulemaking to accomplish two ends. Number one, to create an online licensing system, a registration system, through which pharmacies and pharmacists can confirm that someone they propose to hire or supervise as a pharmacy intern is in fact eligible for that. And number two, to convert our paper-based system that pharmacy interns now use to document experiential hours outside of an academic program, to convert that from our paper system to an online based system. And y'all approved the concept at the July meeting. I've re-included that memo for reference if you need it. And so board staff has gone through, and Mr. Pinion has taken the contents of the memo and has translated those. The primary rule amendment would be Rule 15503, and there's some conforming amendments to Rule 16, 12, 13, and 15 to implement that system. So, Clint?
Yeah, I don't know how much explanation is necessary. We've always had the statutory authority to require registration for internship. And we've always had this rule about getting practical experience. This puts some teeth into that by saying that people need to register as interns before and in order to receive any credit for internship. It pulls all the disparate ways that people do internship for school, foreign graduates, people trying to get reinstated. Everybody is now under the same umbrella. It still does make the schools, the in-state schools, primarily responsible for monitoring that stuff. And if they give you credit, then you're presumed to get credit as long as you're registered as an intern when you're getting it. And it sort of puts the teeth into it in the sense of making sure that people are in trouble if they don't, or if pharmacist managers don't.
What is the logistics for when? So the kids matriculate in early August. Are we talking about something that happens after day one, that they sit in the chair in the PharmD program, or is it something that can happen after they have acceptance during the summer or whatever, and they're going to matriculate?
They have to be actually enrolled.
Yeah, the statute, the requirement under the statute is they have to actually be enrolled in a school of pharmacy.
Okay.
The period, the annual period for the registration will run August 1 of each year through August 1 of the next year, with a 30-day grace period running through the end of August. So the idea will be that new students, when they matriculate as PY1s in August, probably most of them, and I'm sure the schools will help them out, will immediately get registered as interns and then are required to renew that. Of course, this is all renewal without cost.
Right.
But we'll renew that registration annually sometime during the month of August. Keep it at the, what the students will need to get from the schools, which we talked about, of course, and upload will be proof that they are actually enrolled. But that's, August will be the month and all that.
Thank you.
And since there's no cost and there's no, I mean, if somebody does not renew by September 1st, obviously they can't work as an intern on September 1st. But they can pop up on September 2nd and say, I'm here, get back in, I'm still enrolled, and they're in.
Right.
So employers will be able to go in, or will the student produce a letter?
No, this will, once, assuming that the rule goes through and this gets implemented, you all know that we have on our website a license verification portal. Pharmacy intern status will become an option under the verification. So Ashley, if you were interested in bringing somebody in as an intern, and I don't know, say for example, is a student in an out-of-state pharmacy school who is here for the summer or whatever, they would have to go through into the internship registration, and then all you would need to do is click on that, and you could verify immediately whether they were eligible or not. And, like Clint was just saying, let's say you got somebody, and at the out-of-state student might be a particularly good example, say you got somebody coming in for the summer, who wanted to get outside the curriculum intern hours here in North Carolina, you would be able to tell them, if they were sitting there and you say, oh, well, you need to be registered, they don't have to wait till August. They could immediately go down to the system, do a free registration, upload their proof of enrollment, they would be ready to go the instant that got done with it. But,
And I think that's what, I really think that that's kind of at the heart of this. It gives the power of the pharmacist manager to look at our system and see that they're there, because before, there was just no way to even look. If they're not registered, they're not gonna be on there, so I think that tool is really where the heart of
And I like
it
to
is.
have a state back too, because I've had a situation where someone was going to school in Florida but wanted to come home, and I was uncomfortable until I kind of figured out that they were really enrolled in pharmacy school. So I think that's a great.
yeah, and hypothetical, you would tell them, hey, I think you're great, love to have you. Go on, do this free registration, make sure you've got something, from a school that shows your proof.
And it'll give everybody a chance, to go ahead and get their e-program number from an ADP as well, so then that will, move things along quicker and smoother as they go through the process of pharmacist licensure.
And even though, obviously, we haven't passed the rule, the rule has to go through the process to do that. As we discussed last time, the plan is to have this operational by August 1st, 2022. And we'll need to begin an educational process several months ahead of that. But Missy's usual good work has already gone through and has, I was gonna say, a skeleton version of what their online process is. That undersells the amount of work that she's done. But she's really pretty far along on this. So once the rule passes, I feel very confident, if the rule passes, I should say, I feel very confident that then we return right to thoughts, man, get this thing programmed up, we're gonna have it ready, and then we will need to have another discussion amongst all of us about what's the best way of publicizing that, using some ambassadors. I'm sure that we, staff, will be reaching out, and in person, I think, particularly in this first year, to each of the 4 North Carolina schools to remind them of this and walk them through it.
All right, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for just a second. What happens if a student doesn't pass their, fall semester scores and they're taken out of school? How does that work?
Yeah, so, a couple of, there's no perfect answer to that. And we had debated whether, you'll remember last time we debated what would be the frequency of having to renew your registration status. And for, I guess, most perfect accuracy of status enrollment, doing that semester would make sense, but we sort of talked about that. That gets to be a lot.
Yeah.
But instead, what we will also require from someone who becomes a registrant is that they will need to provide us with a FERPA waiver. And that's, I forget what FERPA stands for, but it's basically the privacy.
Educational records, privacy act.
I think that, but it's the privacy statute for educational records. And we would include in the process to get a FERPA waiver from any registrant. So, and we would need, and Tracy Collier said they've been able to do this successfully in South Carolina. We would establish our relationships with the folks at the schools, and if we got word that someone had dropped out or been kicked out, God forbid, or whatever, then the FERPA waiver would allow us to contact the school and say, what's the status of this student? And the reverse would sort of be true as well, that we would work on relationships with schools would let us know. It's not going to be perfect, but I do think it's a substantial improvement over what we got. That's a terrific question.
But the rule does say that, tax tell us within 5 days, no longer eligible.
And they'll have to it won't be a semester result, but it'll be an off schedule.
If we're one or two, not report in that 5 days, which is required by the
Well, what the rule says is that you're engaging in the unlicensed practice of pharmacy, and the pharmacist manager is engaging in allowing the unlicensed practice of pharmacy. And I'm gonna guess with legitimate pharmacy
register, I mean, practically speaking, loss, way we would deal with that is, you know, obviously if it were, let's say somebody, let's just take somebody, let's say, dropped out of pharmacy school in October, let's say, and we find out in December that they continued to act as an intern. Obviously, we look at the particular facts. For that particular person who didn't let us know it was engaged in the unlicensed practice of pharmacy, we have the option, which as you all know we've had to use a couple of times over the years, we go to court and we get an injunction against that individual that says you cannot engage in the practice of pharmacy unless you're appropriately licensed, registered, whatever the case may be. As to, we would look to see what happened with the pharmacist manager. I mean, it's not like our presumption would be you're engaged in some sort of fraud or whatever, but, you know, if we had a case where a pharmacist manager knew that somebody had dropped out of pharmacy school and was not eligible to be and allowed them to continue on, that raises a serious issue. It's not sort of a gotcha.
The alternative would be to register as a technician.
They could, they absolutely could decide to register as a technician and do the duties that a technician would do, which obviously is our view. But that's right, Bill, that is absolutely right.
I mean, a pharmacy manager can say, I relied on your system, and that's right to a point, but if somebody claims they were in pharmacy school in Florida, what was in Ashburn, every day of the week, you say, maybe, I should be pointed there.
But, you know, fortunately, you know, as y'all know, what sort of spurred this rule is we just never had a formal way of doing this, and we've had a handful of examples over the past, I guess, 3 years now where this has happened. So I don't think any of us think this is a huge widespread problem. I think what this gave us the opportunity to do, and I appreciate particularly Ashley's guidance on this, is you're a pharmacist manager out there, you didn't have a good resource that was not super labor intensive for the pharmacist manager. I think ultimately the benefit of this more than anything else is not going to be that, you know, there are hundreds of interns at it. There should be. I think the benefit is we're going to make it much easier for pharmacist managers to do their due diligence. And this goes back to something Missy mentioned a while ago, the way that Missy is working on designing the registration itself. You all know that the vast bulk of intern registrants we will have will be students who are enrolled in a North Carolina-based board of pharmacy, and the vast majority of those students will go on to seek licensure practice. And so the other plus on this, on the back end, is Missy is working on designing that registration system so that when these registrants and interns get ready to apply for licensure, it's going to hoover almost all of that stuff into their application. And particularly where the non-academic internship, now we in North Carolina, thank goodness, don't require experiential hours outside of the academic curriculum. But some states do. And this has been a perpetual sort of headache both for the students and for us, that they need these intern extracurricular, I guess, intern hours. They have to, it's paper affidavit, we have to sign, we have to collect it, we have to certify them up to other states. The other thing this is going to do is for every intern that's registered, there's going to be a mechanism in there. And if they, for example, somebody says, okay, I work for Ashley at Prevo from June 1st of 2023 to August 31st of 2023, and let's say it was, Ashley really worked so hard, and that was 1,500 hours of extra activity. That intern will be able to go into the system and have an entry. They would say, they would select the pharmacy where they work. They will select a pharmacy. This is all searched by our permit and license number. And they will select the pharmacist that they identify as having primarily supervisor, maintenance supervisor. One person, they will enter the number of hours that they say they completed over what period of time in the system, then automatically send to the identified pharmacist supervisor. We have been reported to us that Joe Smith Washington, when another state says, will you verify for us the number of experiential hours, and we go, it's reported instead. So,
We kind of do an FAQ like we do most everything else.
we don't FAQ that, okay, well.
Well, there you go. I hadn't thought about this with all the discussion we've had over the months. So, when kids matriculate into pharmacy school, many of them are pharmacy techs that have chosen to go get their CPHT. So let's say, Jay, you're a pharmacy technician and 2022 rolls around, you've got CPHT to do to maintain your CPHT, but you've been accepted to UNC and you're gonna matriculate in August. Are we gonna give them advice or things of, what, should you let it go? Should you keep doing your CE?
No, probably not, because there were a couple of things on that. Remember that we, the North Carolina law doesn't require that CE, because that's purely from their certification agency. So whatever they choose to do or not do with that, that'll be up to them. I think, I'd be hesitant to get too down in the weeds on getting into that, but what I would say is if somebody called Missy and said, I've been a certified tech in North Carolina for 5 years, and I'm starting pharmacy school in August 15th, at campus, whatever day. And we would certainly advise them, you do need to have an intern registration with us for all of these reasons. As to whether they keep the certified, I think the only thing we would say is you can keep your technician registration if you like. And I think the only thing we would say is you can have them both know that as an intern, you're allowed to do more things than certified tech. But the reason some of them may want to keep both is y'all know there are some employers that even if you're an intern, they, as an employment requirement, they say you need to maintain a registration as a technician. So they would be able to continue doing that. And whether they did or they didn't is probably mostly going to turn on that end. If their employer says you need to keep it if you want to keep running your any capacity, no problem.
And then as they move through to that technician registration, as they don't renew it, because they move on.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Pharmacists, it'll just go in.
Technicians get e-profile.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And that also is all without cost.
The other thing you should know is we've always had sort of an informal process for graduates who are in the process of getting licensed to still be citizens. We've had somebody in recent years push that who was denied a sixth chance to take an exam in North Carolina. Kentucky let them, so they were already pharmacists in Kentucky, but they practiced here, and I don't think they could even find Kentucky on a map. They practiced here as an intern, and so the proposed rule says you can be a graduate intern as long as you are not licensed anywhere, haven't been denied anywhere, have an active application for a license. At some point, at the time now, you can't, take the test.
And of course, that came out of the COVID experience, right? So we got into that issue that we were worried that there were going to be significant, fortunately it turned out that the delays weren't very significant, but we were concerned in 2020, were there going to be delays in the ability to sit for licensing exams, and what happened to these graduates? Are they still considered interns, and for how long?
Right.
We would have to get into that again, but we would take care of that.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Is there any other discussion? Have a proposal to publish or a, motion? Ashley, you want to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make the
This is an honor of Ashley.
This is the Ashley Youngest.
Thank y'all. Yes, I'll make that motion.
And I'll say, I want to be a part of that with that.
Yep, I can. Any further discussion on the motion?
No.
Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to publish proposed amendments to Rule 15503 and conforming amendments to Rules 16, 12, 13, and 15 concerning experience in pharmacy and pharmacy internship, indicate by saying aye. Michelle? Aye. Keith? Aye. Ashley?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Wallace? Aye. Bill?
All right, very good. Before we move to the next rule, I'm gonna call for break, and whoever put Lasix in the coffee, I'll. All right,
great idea. Why don't, it's 10:08, why don't we break until 10:30, to give folks a chance to go check out.
Is that enough time? Sure, I am busy.
Oh, that's great, we'll have to check out.
Administrative,
Hey, what you're doing.
Okay, folks, we're gonna call the meeting back to order. Thank you, folks who are waiting online for your patience. And, so, I believe
We have, one additional rulemaking item on our agenda today. As you all know, the board published for notice and comment proposed revisions, to its rules governing remote medication order processing, and went through a, notice and comment period, received, had a public hearing at the July meeting. After that meeting, the telepharmacy committee, diligently worked through each of the comments that were submitted on the proposed rule. And you have, in your meeting materials, the telepharmacy committee's memo summarizing the comments and their recommendations with respect to each of those comments. As a result of those, what you have in front of you are two things on this agenda item. One is a proposed new rule 2515, which Clint will explain, and revisions to rule 1816, which you all know is our centralized processing rule, into which RMOE and central bill are being combined. That rule reflects the changes that were recommended by the telepharmacy committee, and so I will yield the floor to Mr. Pinion, who will summarize these and go over the procedural options.
Yeah, let me do the procedural options first, so that you can keep those in mind as you go through. One of these, the 2515, would be a wholly new rule, and that has to go through notice and comment. 1816 went through notice and comment. Revisions were made based on the comments in ways that uniformly made things easier for pharmacies to satisfy. There is a statute that governs whether you have to republish for notice and comment rules if you make certain changes, and it's generally things that you've added a completely different subject, you've made things a lot more burdensome for people, and not when you're responding to comments to make things the way the regulator would like it to be. So, we informally provided this to the staff council at RRC, who, by the way, is leaving in 2 weeks, and it's been a great resource for 9 years. And such a sad to see her go. She reviewed it and said, yes, these changes are the sort that do not require you to republish the rules. So you can adopt the rules today if you want to go to the RRC for the usual process. You could republish it like you could republish any rule at any time if you wanted to comment on that. But since we've responded to the comments, you don't have to. So, and one more housekeeping matter so that I will have said. Brenda Schaefer texted me a moment ago, and shout out to Brenda as well, that one of these provisions needs to be changed to make it consistent with other changes, so I'll bring that when I get there. So, 2515, the new rule. As we were going through the RMOE process, the proposed RMOE rules dealt with two pharmacies situations. You got a pharmacy that uses another pharmacy for central fill, or a pharmacy that uses another pharmacy, or pharmacies for RMOE, and there were a number of comments with that on, shouldn't we be able to do that for our own employees? We can do that during prep act, they can work from home, we like to continue that. So 2515 is a rule that would allow folks to let pharmacists or pharmacy techs work from home doing RMOE type things if they want to. It's limited to the permitted locations on employees, because obviously if you're using, your CVS and you're not using somebody at that location, you're using another location, then that falls into the RMOE rule. This is just in-house. So that's terms of changes, there were a few, and some of them are sort of stylistic, but not, like we had said, that, both pharmacies and their pharmacist managers would be jointly and severally liable for all the actions of everybody who took that out. But the substantive changes are, in central fill arrangements, folks said, well, we think that the pharmacy that sends it off over here to be filled, it ought to be able to be sent directly from that pharmacy to the patient if the patient wants it. And the committee felt that that was a reasonable thing to do if the patient opted in to having it delivered from the filling pharmacy. That's not something that the committee had previously addressed because the old rule required it to go back to the originating pharmacy, and that was not something that we were particularly thinking about. But it seemed reasonable. Filling pharmacy can shift if they want. And in that light, the Brenda amendment would be to C2, where we have defined originating and receiving pharmacies so that it says the originating pharmacy is the one that ultimately dispenses, and the receiving pharmacy ships it to the originating pharmacy. So that change would need to be made to be consistent with other subsequent changes. Glasses are fogging up, so I can't see with them or I can't see without them. There was also a provision that said that, in a central fill arrangement, you can say which of the pharmacies is responsible for counseling. The prior rule said the originating pharmacy is responsible for counseling. The proposed amendment goes back to that, and I think part of that is a desire to keep that point of contact, because in a central fill, you've taken it to a particular pharmacy to fill that relationship you have. Also, to the extent that somebody else is doing counseling, they're doing RMOE, and so that should, to the extent it happens, at least, have the protections in the RMOE. The second and more contentious set of changes dealt with the requirement that the individual pharmacists and the individual technicians be registered, be licensed or registered to the board, in case may be. A number of the comments did not like that, and did not like it at all. As you may remember, John, you suggested that Walgreens would recommend that instead of requiring licensure, as an alternative for people that aren't licensed, use the passport program. The passport program has now morphed in a number of ways. But what it's going to ultimately be is, what are they calling it? Verify.
RX Verify.
For the time being, it's RX Verify. Which is going to be a program that NCBOP is going to run, which essentially,
It's essentially Passport.
is essentially passport. It's a disciplinary history monitoring program in real time, so that if Joe Blow in Kansas gets disciplined, we will be able to know about that, which is really the main benefit that licensing would have had, if we would have gotten rewards for that. Solve that problem. To the extent that the committee was concerned about being able to discipline individual pharmacists in other states, I would say that the committee felt comfortable that if they could monitor the behavior of individuals in other states, and then take action against the permit who continue to employ somebody got anything else on that?
No, I think that accurately summarizes that the proposed rule, to boil it down to the bottom line, would say, that, pharmacists providing who are not physically located in practicing in North Carolina, who are providing RMOE services to assist a North Carolina located pharmacy must be either A, individually licensed in North Carolina, or B, hold a current NABP verified credential. And Glenn, I think, completely accurately summarized, what that gets us in terms of individual accountability. I will also note that NABP verified, there's a cost for that, of course. The cost of maintaining an NABP verified is, half the cost of maintaining an individual North Carolina license to practice pharmacy, so it's significantly less burdensome from a financial standpoint. And the option exists, as to how folks want to approach that, so I think you've covered.
Yep, and the pharmacies are obviously required to tell us who it is that's performing the services. Give us the information so that we can do that monitoring.
Yeah, that's right, and let me get that just one more time for emphasis. It wouldn't just be that you have to have, obviously somebody's licensed with us, but they've got a profile with us. If somebody instead would propose to use the NABP verify option, they would need to register with us, so we would know who they are. That would be a registration without cost. We would just have to set up a registration to do that. I think Missy could probably do in one day.
Even if they, you know, they come to a profile and then there's like one other something.
Right.
Over there.
And there was another comment about how, someone thought that we were allowing pharmacy tax in other states to do pharmacist things, and that's not what we said. But it was decided by the committee to say a little longer and more drawn out, that technicians can only do what their home state allows and what we allow, not just what their home state allows. So I think that is that. They do not have to register, the technicians don't have to register. I think the notion there was if the permit has to register, has to be permitted, and the pharmacists are being verified that they are adequately responsible for the technicians.
So those, Clint's right, those are the big substantive pieces that changed, and as Clint accurately summarized, changed in a way that was favorable to the commenters. I would like personally to commend the telepharmacy committee, which spent a lot of time and a lot of effort going through each of these comments and considering the options and the pros and cons of each. And of course, you all have their memo on that. But obviously happy to answer questions, talk through issues, see what you guys think.
So this NABP program, it's called Verified, is it already up and running?
NABP indicates to me the plan is to have it up and running by February 1st, 2022, which would be before the effective date of this rule, if it passes.
And this is what you were talking about, the rules and regulations say we don't have to republish those.
That's right.
The changes we made in response to the comments were all sufficiently within the bounds of what people would understand would be an issue.
So people that lied got what they wanted.
Well, I think that, we owe some thanks to the commenters for, raising issues, although some of them didn't raise it in the most productive fashion. I think they would probably use certain people in this room and talking right now is not, raising their comments in a productive fashion.
I guess my point is, even though we're not required to republish or comment, it doesn't sound like to me that we should do it anyway.
I mean, I don't think we should get into the business of republishing over and over and over again just because we run away. I mean, the point of the notice and comment is to make changes in response to comments, which we did.
Yeah.
And it would be a bad habit, I think, to say, well, we did this, or, you know, did we do it well enough? Tell us, one way or the other. Because then you're in an endless cycle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think in instances, like this one, where there's been robust commentary on a rule, and there's been robust consideration of those comments, and very substantial movement in a proposed rule in the direction of the commenters, I agree with that. I think, you know, so absolutely satisfactory.
Well, I do. Yes, we've satisfied our obligation. Who are on the committee?
Health Pharmacy Committee, Keith and Mark.
Okay, you guys are satisfied, this is where it needs to be.
I agree with Clint, you know, we got a lot of great comments, you know, a few of which were not delivered in a collegial fashion. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, our goal as a committee was to do the right thing. And, you know, and some great points were brought up, and we took them into consideration, and we used them.
I would agree with that. I mean, that's how we approached it. And we went back and forth on a lot of the stuff. I mean, we really did. I mean, we did a lot of discussion.
So what were the bulk of the, objections with it, to have a pharmacist actually have to be licensed?
That was
Yes.
the most consistent.
Yeah, out of so the total number of comments that were submitted, to the board, we received 20 written comments, verbal comments from 11 members of the public, 6 of whom had also provided contemporaneously written comments, or any 5 echo comments previously provided in writing by the other. There's no question that among the, so of the 20 written comments, well, I guess out of the total population of comments we received, 19 of those concerned the individual licensure requirements, and that was by far. Most, the other comments, I think the next high, I'm just looking real quick, the next highest number of comments on any provision was 5, and that was 5 commenters who sort of reminded us that your rule contemplates between 2 different pharmacies. We have been using our own employees to do some remote work and would like to continue doing that, so that was number 2. But this particular issue was by far the biggest.
And is our rule consistent with what other states are doing?
Yes.
And again, NABP stepped up to the plate to facilitate this part of it.
In addition, the effective date is a good question. This would be considered at the RRC meeting, I guess, next week. So the normal effective date would be December 1st. We can certainly make it March 1st.
Yeah, my recommendation, I'm sorry, Bill, but my recommendation would be that if it's the decision of the board to go forward with this rule, I would suggest making an effective date of March 1st, which would get time for that program to be implemented in time for us to do some education on that. And that's not going to hurt anybody, because folks are able to do these things under the emergency waivers right now, and they're not going to be on between now and March. So that would not interrupt existing operations.
So the committee is recommending this. We still need to vote to publish, but we need a motion first.
Let me state what the motion might be if someone were to make a motion. It would be to publish 2515 for notice of comment, to adopt the repeal of 1417, if I've got these numbers wrong.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And to adopt the amendment with the technical changes to 1816 with an additional change to the definition of originating and receiving pharmacy, such that it does not say that the originating pharmacy has been, and receiving pharmacy has. Get back to originating pharmacy, and with an effective date on 1816 of March the 1st. And the repeal of it.
Okay, that's a lot of moving parts.
Yep.
Do
You
the
can break it
committee members feel like it needs to come back to the committee before we vote?
No. We're going to end up with the same result.
Any other questions or discussions?
I would make that motion.
Did you say that, Walt?
Repeal? No.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to publish.
I restate. We have a motion on the floor to publish proposed new rule 2515 for notice and comment, to adopt the repeal of board rule number 1417, to adopt amended rule 1816 with technical corrections as Mr. Pinion described, and with a proposed effective date of March 1st, 2022.
Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second.
Call roll.
Yes, please.
So, votes on the motion, Michelle,
Yes.
Keith. Yes. Ashley.
Yes.
Andy.
Ahoy.
Paul.
Yes.
And Bill. I'm sorry, that's correct.
Every time we get.
Yes.
I would like, again, I want to express a personal thanks here to the Telepharmacy Committee, which continues its work in some different areas. In fact, we got a little field trip coming up, here next month for the Telepharmacy Committee, but this was an enormous piece of work, with a lot of moving parts. I do think that the comments that we received were helpful to producing a better overall product. Mr. Pinion did an incredible job of meshing an awful lot of moving parts, into the rules, so, thank you all, for that.
Very good. That brings us to the consent agenda. We have background. Does anybody have any questions about any of these? I heard them. I'll be glad to try to elaborate if you'd like.
I have a question. On the, letter of warning to, how did you arrive, based on the, not like there was a working conditions issue there with, inadequate staffing based on, I read it once. How did you arrive at the letter of warning for the permit?
Well, that's a good question. Let me see if I can bring it.
I know Mr. Pinion was sitting in on that one too, so he can. when he
Let's
comes
wait
back.
till, let's wait till Frank comes back. He probably is.
I was not present at that one, so I'm not gonna offer speculation.
The opinion is arriving.
What's working?
So, go ahead.
Well, I'm just asking you, as far as the letters of warning to the permit on, regarding the error that was made, well, I guess I'm just curious, how did we arrive at that, and maybe the other, and were there other alternatives considered?
I think there were alternatives considered. This was needed the vaccinated pharmacist to go vaccinate someone else. And so, there was an awful lot of work for one pharmacist to do, that I'm sure contributed to the error, but it was something that was, certainly a, unique situation in our nation's history that they were trying to manage. They had it managed until they decided they needed to manage the staff they had some other way. So I think the letter warning basically said you have to staff the problem, you try to deal with it. You didn't deal with it that great, but
It wasn't a pattern of continual, it's just.
I mean, obviously, everybody has bad days. I mean, I've experienced them, and probably will experience them again. But yeah, I'm just curious, you know, I don't think, you know, the pharmacists sound like they were doing the best they could do under the circumstances, but, you know, did Walgreens not have any other alternatives as far as being able to pull in another pharmacist?
I think not, and they had trained technicians to vaccinate at other stores, but they were having to roll that out slowly, obviously.
Yeah.
And they hadn't gotten there yet, so this was just sort of a complete mess. And honestly, the pharmacist screwed up in some ways that were incomprehensible, really, regardless of how much.
It just seemed like the right decision.
And they all said, yes, after we got the tech trained, and after the initial, month, everything worked fine with that, everything would be, all the techs are vaccinated, everything was great. So it was a rather short term emergency, perfect storm. Yeah.
Okay, it's coming back to me too. They had mechanisms in place to catch the kind of error, or they put mechanisms in place to catch the kind of error. It had to do with redispensing medication from a prescription container that was labeled for another patient that never got it. He got put back on the shelf. And they skipped one of the steps.
The prescription was for 10 milligrams of lexapro, and so they went to a return to stock bottle that was a 20 milligram bottle. The tech stuck it in, and this caused a warning to the pharmacist, hey, this didn't go through the normal work ban. You need to pay particular attention to this. So there were two, both the tech and the pharmacist, they were pretty much things, no matter how busy or not busy you are.
And the patient did have some consequences as a result. As I recall.
Yeah.
So that's how we, I mean, I guess I didn't see any.
I'm not saying anything was wrong, I just wanted a little bit of background.
It's good, I'm glad you asked. I didn't see any real problems. True disciplinary action. I can sort of. Right, good question. How about the other two? One was a reinstatement, both of them, I guess, were reinstatement.
There were three. Statement.
Yeah, there are 3 reinstatements, pharmacists who have come through the process and through PHP and appear ready, based on the advocacy of PHP, to resume practice with appropriate conditions.
Certainly reinforces the amount of confidence that we put in PHP to guide us in our decisions. Motion to approve the consent order, consent agenda. Motion. Second. Any other discussion, questions, or comments? Line? Or not, sorry.
What are you trying to say, Bill?
Okay, so we got a motion and a second, I'll shut it up.
Yeah, motion to approve the consent agenda has been made and seconded. All, please indicate your vote upon your name. Michelle? wanted to adjourn, we could, and then we'll, take a short break, and then. Let me call the roll. All in favor, motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Michelle. Keith? Ashley?
Andy?
Aye.
Wally? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, folks who are listening in today. Brenda, thank you for sending your comment.